Hey guys, what's up? God bless you. I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful week. We're back at it again with another video. This time around, I want to talk about something very, very interesting. There's been a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation for the past, I would say, 3 weeks, almost a month now. And it all points to a possible Michael Bay return. I have done this video multiple times, but I kind of like every time I do it, something happens, something changes in the whole narrative. Initially, I was a little bit skeptical about this. I'm not a big fan of some of the aspects of the Michael Bay movies. I think the first one's the best one. Three has the best final act of that of the movie. Four has a good idea. Five is barely a movie, and again, two is also barely a movie. But two does have the forest fight and has great visuals. That I can contest that five did not have great visuals, only like in certain scenes, but I digress. Then Bumblebee came out and that kind of like reinvigorated the live action franchise, but didn't do big numbers in the box office. And Rise of the Beasts, which doesn't have great visuals, but it's still miles better film than any of the other Michael Bay stuff. And then Transformers 1, which is the magnum opus of the brand right now. In anything, that and the comic books are the magnum opuses. So, that being said, right now, like, it all points to a possible Michael Bay return, and I'm still on the 50-50 chance that it might end up being true. But as I kept, thinking about it and analyzing it, it doesn't make sense on how it's gonna that be possible. And there are rumors out there that are swirling around, and I was not gonna talk about that. So initially, the video that I made prior to this one really avoided that, and mainly on the chances. I focus more on the chances of it being true or not. I'm still gonna keep it 50-50 right now. I do think right now, if the rumors are true, and this ends up being true, right? It makes sense. So Vin Laszlo has been posting a lot, and he has had, in the past, experience with insider news, and he has gotten things very right, and he doesn't talk. He that's not his job, he when he has something, when he hears something, it's pretty much a done deal. He is, for what I've known him for all these years, he's a fan of the brand, and he has some insider news. He has been talking about a possible, this movie being a possible sequel to Rise of the Beasts, but with a twist. That is interesting, but what the twist is. So this week, a lot of things started to rumble. We've seen Michael Bay commenting on fan posts and fan accounts, and just interacting with people, saying like he might do that. That's like he would like to do that. He would like to return, and yada yada yada. And then Tyrese, in a recent interview, he said that he spoke with Michael Bay, and he's like, "That's all I'm gonna say." And he's like, I was with Michael Bay on the phone last week. That's all I'm gonna say, and whatnot. So it's interesting. It's interesting knowing that Tyrese is a big fan of the franchise himself, and how would he return if this is a reboot? A lot of stuff that Vin Laszlo has been, posting, and it kind of gives the hint that this movie might be the G.I. Joe versus Transformers movie that they're working on. So the timeline kind of adds up. It's just a matter of perspective, I guess. Last year we had like rumors that they were working on a G.I. Joe versus Transformers movie, and the movie was being penned by one of the Jurassic World writers, and then Chris Hemsworth, was being in negotiations and talks. Nothing came out of that, and now this. And it's a possible kind of like treading of that first movie, which in hindsight, the first Transformers movie, it's Transformers versus G.I. Joe. So if you go into, I don't know who's on the team, because a lot of things change at Paramount. Like, Paramount is now owned by Skydance, the Skydance company. How different they're going to be when approaching this franchise now. How different it's going to be. So, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, if it's even true. So Vin Laswell kind of was talking about and commented on that and said, "Hello, Roadblock," and we might be reading too much into this. And so that means if we go on a limb talking about that, either Tyrese is trying to get a role on the movie and he might be cast as one of the Joes, or I don't know, something different here is going on. So, or he's just being cheeky with it, He's not a scooper like that, but when he gets stuff right, he does get stuff right. He's a fan of the franchise. That being said, if this ends up being true in the movie that he's trying to develop, even though he kind of like resisted the idea of the G.I. Joe, for what I've heard, and I was talking about this with some friends. I didn't do too much research on this, but I understand that from Rise of the Beasts, in that end credit scene, he resisted the idea of the G.I. Joe end credit scene. But I think it's the best thing that they could do. I think if they go this route, they kind of continue with the trilogy, and they finish off that trilogy with Bumblebee. They finish off the Rise of the Beasts, and they finish it off and with the G.I. Joe versus, and they kind of like leave it at that. Maybe they could move on to something different. Maybe the Josh Cooley trilogy, because they said they were working with multiple, movies. And who says that they can't do like multiple timelines of Transformer movies? Maybe they could do like the G.I. Joe versus thing and have that separate from the mainline stuff. Have what they're doing with the Batman and Warner Brothers, which is still to be determined. There was a lot of rumors and people kind of hopeful that the Batman might end up being a DCU movie and appear in the Superman and stuff like that. But that's kind of the narrative kind of switched back to it being in Elseworlds, which makes sense. I don't want the that version of Batman be in that universe, because they've had to change it drastically and dramatically, and I think that movie kind of worked because it wasn't, it was rooted in reality. It took a lot from the page of the movie 7, and it was very noir and gothic, and that was awesome. It worked. It worked. It's probably one of my favorite Batman movies of all time. And, but taking that as an example, I think it could work, have an imprint, separate timelines, and do something else, and try to connect everything. You can do that if it's done properly down the line, but that's just me being, facetious and just, hopeful, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think chances are that this might end up happening. More than anything, I think there's a higher chance now that, that this might be the case. And it makes sense. I think it's playing to Michael Bay's strengths. It's playing to what he knows what to do best, which is action and spectacle, and maybe have like a loose story in there. And it's the only way I see him coming back, effectively coming back. But to a sole like Transformers reboot, I doubt it. I really doubt it. And it all comes down to what they're going to be doing to the franchise. I know that they wanted to focus more, and I think David Ellison really wanted that to be the case, and he was one of the producers that was pushing for that. Before that, now he's a CEO, so they haven't talked about the team that's going into these movies. It's interesting because they might build a new team to build these movies, to produce these movies. So it only time will tell. It's interesting what's happening. So if it's true, everything's like a little bit too far along for what we know, and we might get a title by the end of this year, or maybe sooner, maybe October, New York Comic-Con, who knows? But we're pretty close to that, and for what it's been being talked about in the web, the movie's far along development, and it's interesting. And one of the things that I want to talk about before I leave, it's that they said that the POV is going to be the robots. How's that going to be, how is that going to be like effective for these movies? I think if you're going to do a G.I. Joe versus Transformers movie, you got to do the way that they did Rise of the Beasts, which was like a 50-50 split. They got to do it. They got to do 50-50 because you got to develop your robots, you got to develop your human characters and stuff like that. If they can get good criticism and then money, they're golden. I think they're going to go for that route. I think they're going to do the Godzilla vs. Kong route. Go for a spectacle that has a well-placed storyline and, play to their strengths. And it's still playing it safe for them at this point. Then they can experiment. So I think this is going to be the likely scenario. The more I think about it, I think it's kind of convincing me that this is going to happen. So question is for you guys. Do you think this is going to be the case? Do you think Transformers versus G.I. Joe, directed by Michael Bay, is going to come out soon? You might even get a release date. We might even get a release date. Do you imagine they start filming? Because now films, they could film a movie in like 3 weeks and it releases on like July or something like that. If they film this movie right now, they started filming like around October, November-ish, and they set a release date to June or July of next year, I wouldn't be surprised. Questions for you guys. Comment down below. Let me know. Remember to like, subscribe, and let me know what you want to see on the channel. Let's talk about it. Okay, guys? Remember, God bless you all. Stay gold till all are one. Bye-bye, guys.